What would you do if the very people you trusted most, your own family, took the one treasure that carried your life's love story and sold it for pennies, calling it just metal? Could you forgive and stay quiet? Or would you find a way to make them remember what they had done for the rest of their lives? I'll tell you what I did. This is my story. A story of how I gave my heart, my home, and my strength to the people I loved, and how they chose to repay me. The betrayal didn't come from strangers, but from the children I had raised, the very ones I believed would carry my memory with pride. And when I discovered the truth, the silence in my house was heavier than any storm outside. But don't mistake me for a weak old woman. I may have wrinkles on my hands, but my spirit is not broken. When the time came, I made sure my voice was heard, even after my last breath. Because when my will was finally read, those who thought they had gained everything discovered that they had lost more than they could ever imagine. Strong grandmothers never stay silent when family crosses the line. If you believe wisdom should never be taken for granted, make sure you subscribe now. And if you don't, then at least tell us in the comments why you choose silence. I've lived more than 8 decades, and every year has carved its story into me. I've known deep love, real lasting love, with my Michael. We built a life together, and when he slipped that ring onto my finger on a warm spring day in 1968, I never imagined I would one day have to defend it against my own blood. That ring was my anchor. To anyone else, it might have looked like a plain gold band, but to me it carried the warmth of Michael's hands, the laughter of our wedding day, and the weight of every promise we kept through joy and hardship. Every night before bed, I slipped it into a velvet box by my bedside, right beside Michael's old watch. And every morning, I placed it back on my finger to carry him with me through the day. For 55 years, that ring was never lost, never misplaced, never forgotten. After Michael passed, I lived quietly in my small Boston apartment. It wasn't much, but it was enough for me. Then life brought Lily, my granddaughter, back into my arms. She came to me with her husband, Mark, and their 2 little ones, Rosie and Leo. They were in trouble. Mark had lost his job, their savings had vanished, and they had nowhere to go. When Lily asked if they could stay with me, I didn't hesitate. My heart was too soft to turn them away. I told myself it would only be for a short while, just until they could get back on their feet. At first, it felt almost like a blessing. My quiet apartment was filled with the laughter of children again. I stretched my pension to cover food for 5 instead of 1. My knees ached from bending to pick up toys, and my nights were restless with worry over bills, but I told myself this was family. This was love in action. After all, what kind of grandmother would I be if I turned them away? But over time, the weight grew heavier. My doctor's appointments had to be rushed or postponed. My own little comforts, a new book, a better tea blend, disappeared from my life. Still, I did not complain. I told myself, this is family. This is my son's child. I must endure. Until the day I reached for my ring, and it was gone. It was a Tuesday morning. I was preparing to leave for my weekly bridge game. I opened the velvet box on my nightstand, expecting the familiar glint of gold. Empty. My heart leapt into my throat. I searched the drawer, the dresser, even my jewelry box where I sometimes placed it while washing dishes. Nothing. The ring was gone. And in my bones, I knew it hadn't been misplaced. I walked to the kitchen, my steps slow but heavy. Lily was there, spreading peanut butter on bread for the children's lunch. My voice shook, but I managed to ask, "Lily, dear, have you seen my wedding ring?" Her hands stilled. She didn't meet my eyes. Her cheeks flushed as she forced a smile. "Your ring?" "No, Nana, maybe you put it somewhere else." I knew that look. I had seen it years ago on my son's face when he tried to sneak a cookie from the jar. It was the look of guilt. My chest tightened, and I pressed her. "No. I always keep it in the box. It's gone. Tell me the truth." Her shoulders slumped, and she lowered her head. Her voice cracked. "Mark took it. He said we needed the money, Nana. Just for a little while. He promised he'd get it back once he found work. Please, don't be angry. He only wanted to keep us afloat." Her words hit me harder than any blow. Not only had Mark taken my ring, but Lily had known. She had stood there, letting me search, letting me panic, while she said nothing. I steadied myself against the table. My voice came out quieter than I expected, but sharper than any knife. You sold my heart for scraps. That ring wasn't just metal. It was my life, my love, my history. And you let it be taken from me. Tears spilled down Lily's cheeks. She tried to plead, but I raised my hand. My decision was made. Get out. Take your husband. Take your children. Leave my house. Her cries echoed in my ears, but my heart had turned to stone. Some betrayals cannot be undone with apologies. When they left, the apartment fell silent again. Too silent. I sat in my chair, staring at the empty velvet box. My hands trembled, but my resolve hardened. I had given everything, and they had taken everything. But I would not let them take my dignity. And though I did not know it then, I would make sure they carried the weight of that choice. Not just in my lifetime, but long after I was gone. After Lily and Mark left my home, the silence that filled these rooms was nothing like the gentle quiet I had once cherished. No, this was a heavy silence, one that pressed on my chest every night as I looked at the empty velvet box. For years, that little box had held my anchor, my strength. Now it was nothing more than a reminder of betrayal. The days blurred. My knees hurt more, my hands stiffened, and the loneliness dug deeper. I should have been focusing on my health, on finding comfort in the years I had left. But every time I thought of that missing ring, anger would course through me like fire. I had sacrificed everything for them, my money, my strength, my peace, and still, they chose to take without asking, without care. That was when I realized, if I didn't take control, my last act on this earth would be to reward betrayal. That I could never allow. One afternoon, Mr. Davies, my lawyer, came for our regular review. He was a kind man with spectacles that always slipped down his nose. Usually, our meetings were polite and simple. Papers signed, small talk about the weather. But this time, he noticed the way I sat hunched in my chair, stirring my tea without drinking it. "Agnes," he said gently, "you seem troubled. What's on your mind?" I set the spoon down and looked him straight in the eye. "My wedding ring, Arthur. Lily and her husband sold it. They pawned the one thing that tied me to Michael, the one thing I held closest to my heart." His eyes widened. "Your wedding ring? The one from 1968. I nodded. My throat tightened, but I pressed on, telling him everything. How I discovered it missing. How Lily had lied at first, then confessed. How Mark had stolen it without shame. How I had thrown them out of my house that very day. He listened quietly, his pen resting on his notepad, though he didn't write a word. When I finished, the room was thick with silence. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Agnes, this is more than a theft. This is a betrayal of trust. I need to ask you, do you want to reconsider your will?" The question lingered in the air like a challenge. I had written my will years ago, dividing everything equally among my 3 grandchildren, Lily, Bethany, and David. At the time it had felt fair. But now, fairness seemed foolish. Why should Lily, who had trampled on my trust, receive the same as the others who had shown me nothing but love? I sat back in my chair, staring at the photograph of Michael on the mantel. His smile seemed to speak to me even now. He had always believed in standing firm, in teaching lessons that mattered. "No, Arthur," I said slowly. "I don't want it to remain as it is. I want changes. Serious ones." He adjusted his glasses, waiting. "Tell me what you have in mind." At first, I thought about simply cutting Lily out completely. But the more I considered it, the more I realized that would be too easy for her. If I disinherited her outright, she would cry, she would blame me, and then she would move on, painting herself as the victim. No. I wanted her to feel the weight of her choices. I wanted her to know what it means when you discard something priceless. So I began. My home. I want Bethany to have it. She has always been kind to me, even from across the country. She never once asked for money. She only called to check on me, to tell me about her work, to remind me I was loved. She deserves the comfort of this house. Mr. Davies scribbled notes as I spoke. My savings and investments. I want David to inherit those. He may not need the money, but he will respect what it represents. He's responsible, level-headed, and he calls me every Sunday without fail. He will honor what I leave behind." Mr. Davies nodded again. And Lily, I felt the fire rise in me. This was the moment. Lily will not receive money. She will not receive the house. She will receive one thing, my hope chest. But not freely. There will be a condition. He frowned slightly. "A condition?" "Yes," I said, my voice sharp. "The chest has a hidden compartment. It will only be hers if she fulfills one task. She must find my wedding ring and return it within 1 year of the reading of my will." His eyes widened. "Agnes, that would be nearly impossible. A ring sold to a pawn shop months ago. Who knows where it is now?" I gave him a thin smile. "Exactly. She will spend a year chasing something she threw away. And if she cannot find it, the chest and all it contains will be donated to charity." He hesitated, clearly wrestling with the unusual nature of my request. But he knew better than to argue. He had seen the steel in my eyes. He nodded, and with careful strokes of his pen, he began drafting the new terms. As I signed the papers, I felt a strange calm wash over me. For the first time since the ring disappeared, I felt in control again. This was no longer just about the theft of an object. It was about teaching a lesson. Lily needed to learn that trust, once broken, cannot be bought back with excuses. She needed to understand that greed has consequences. That night, I sat by the window with a cup of tea and whispered to Michael's photograph. They thought they could take from me without consequence. But I will show them, my love. I will show them. Life doesn't always give second chances, and neither do wise women. If you want to keep hearing stories that prove just how strong we can be, subscribe now so you'll never miss one. And if you think you're strong enough to go without, tell us in the comments why. From that day forward, I lived with a renewed sense of purpose. Every phone call with Bethany brought me joy. Every Sunday chat with David gave me comfort. I never told them about the changes in my will. They didn't need to know. My affection for them wasn't tied to money, and I wanted them to feel secure in my love, not my estate. As for Lily, I kept my silence. She tried calling at first, leaving voicemails full of tears and apologies. Mark even came to my door once, hat in hand, muttering promises to make things right. I never answered. The trust was gone. And when the day of my passing finally came, it would be my final act to remind them of what they had lost, not just a fortune, but my faith in them. And so my plan was set. The will had been rewritten, the trap prepared. All that was left was time. I was not alive to walk into Mr. Davies's office that day, but I could almost see it, as though I was standing in the corner, watching every face, every gesture, every twitch of a hand. Death may have taken me, but the words I left behind were alive, and they carried more weight than I ever could in person. The letter from Mr. Davies had been delivered to all 3 of my grandchildren. For Bethany and David, it must have been a shock, a reminder that their Nana was gone. For Lily, I imagine the letter stirred something different, hope. Hope that perhaps the old woman she had betrayed had softened in her final days. Hope that she might be forgiven with a share of my estate. She was about to discover how wrong she was. The office at 122 Beacon Street was not large, but it was dignified. A polished mahogany table dominated the center of the room, surrounded by leather chairs that squeaked under the slightest movement. Shelves lined the walls, heavy with thick law books, their spines worn from years of use. The smell of paper and old wood filled the air. It was the kind of room where words mattered, and every pause carried weight. Bethany arrived first. She carried herself with quiet dignity, though her eyes were red from crying. She sat down, clutching a tissue, her face pale but calm. David entered shortly after, dressed in a dark suit that spoke of both respect and practicality. He placed a comforting hand on Bethany's shoulder before taking his seat. Then came Lily. She walked in with Mark at her side, his jaw tight, his eyes restless as they darted around the room. Lily's face was carefully arranged into something she must have thought resembled remorse, chin lowered, lips pressed together, hands folded neatly in her lap. But her eyes gave her away. They flickered constantly, shifting from Bethany to David, to the table, to the lawyer. She was not grieving. She was waiting. Mr. Davies adjusted his spectacles and cleared his throat. His voice was steady, trained by years of reading words that would alter lives. Thank you all for coming. We are gathered today to read the final will and testament of Agnes Miller. For a moment, no one breathed. Then he began. He spoke my full name, my date of birth, the names of my parents, and my late husband, Michael. He read my wishes for a simple memorial, no fuss, and a donation to the local animal shelter. Bethany's lips trembled at that. She knew how much I loved the stray cats in my neighborhood. Then came the part they were waiting for. The inheritance. To my granddaughter, Bethany Miller, Mr. Davies read, who has been a constant source of kindness, encouragement, and love. I leave my home at 145 Orchard Street, with all furnishings and the adjoining land. May it bring you the same comfort it brought me for so many years. Bethany gasped, a hand flying to her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling freely now. She whispered, almost to herself, "The house? She left me the house." David leaned closer, squeezing her hand. "She always said you were the most selfless of us," he murmured, his voice gentle. Lily's face hardened. The mask of forced sorrow slipped, replaced by something sharp and cold. She had assumed she would get the house. She had lived in it. She had filled it with her children's laughter, with her presence. And now it belonged to her cousin. Mr. Davies continued. To my grandson David Miller, whose steady presence and integrity have always been a source of strength to me, I leave all of my financial assets, including savings, retirement funds, and investments, totaling $927,000. For a moment, David simply stared. He had always known I lived comfortably, but not that comfortably. He swallowed, his usual composure slipping into open astonishment. "Nearly $1 million, he whispered. Bethany squeezed his arm. Her tears turned to quiet laughter through the grief. "Nana believed in you." Across the table, Lily's composure shattered. Her jaw tightened, her nails dug into her palms. Mark's face flushed a deep red. They shifted in their chairs, stiff with rage. A house. Nearly $1 million. And nothing for them. But Mr. Davies wasn't finished. He adjusted his papers, his tone deliberately formal now. "And finally," he said, his eyes lifting to meet Lily's, "to my granddaughter, Lily Miller." Lily straightened in her seat, hope flickering in her eyes. "I leave my hope chest." The room went silent. Bethany's lips parted in surprise. David frowned, confused. Mark shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "A chest," he spat. "That's it? After everything we did for her?" "Mark," Lily hissed, grabbing his sleeve. But her voice was shaking. She was stunned. Mr. Davies raised a hand, calm and firm. "Sit down, please. There is more." Mark dropped heavily back into his chair, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. Mr. Davies continued. "The chest is an heirloom. It contains a secret compartment. That compartment, however, will only be unlocked if Lily completes one condition. She must find and return Agnes's wedding ring to this office within 1 year of today's date." Gasps filled the room. Bethany covered her mouth. David's brows shot upward. Lily's face drained of color. Her wedding ring?" Lily whispered. "But it's gone. We sold it months ago." "Yes," Mr. Davies said softly. She was aware. Mark slammed his fist against the table. "This is absurd. You expect us to track down some old piece of jewelry from a pawn shop? It's impossible." "The choice is yours," Mr. Davies replied evenly. "The chest is yours only if you return the ring. If not, the chest and its contents will be donated." Lily sat frozen, her lips trembling. Then Mr. Davies picked up a final page, written in my hand. His voice lowered as he read. "To my grandchildren Bethany and David, I leave my love and trust, which you have always honored. To Lily I leave this task. Because once, you believed my most precious possession was worth only a few $100s. I am here to tell you it was worth so much more." He paused, his eyes flicking up briefly. Then he spoke the words I had arranged carefully, my final twist of the knife. The wedding ring was no ordinary band. It was made from a rare alloy, passed down through my family. Certified jewelers valued it at $175,000. The air was sucked from the room. Lily gasped audibly, her hand clutching at her chest. Mark's face contorted, horror mixing with fury. 175,000, he rasped. Mr. Davies nodded. Yes. Your grandmother knew its worth. She chose never to reveal it until now. Lily's eyes filled with tears, not of grief, but of despair. She and Mark had thrown away a small fortune, pawned off their future for scraps. They had not just stolen an heirloom. They had discarded their chance at security, at stability, at redemption. She knew, Lily whispered, shaking her head. She knew all along, and she never said a word. Mr. Davies folded the paper and set it down. She wanted you to understand. Bethany and David sat quietly, their shock tempered by sorrow. But across the table, Lily and Mark looked like people who had been stripped bare in front of the world. The chest sat in the corner of the office, heavy and silent, its locked compartment waiting. The one-year clock had begun, and with it, the punishment I had chosen. I was gone, but my voice echoed in every corner of that room. They wanted wealth, but I left them with an impossible burden. They thought they had been clever, but they had outsmarted only themselves. The game had begun. From the moment Mr. Davies closed that folder and set my will aside, the clock began ticking for Lily and Mark. 1 year. 12 months to find a ring they had already dismissed as worthless. 12 months to try to undo what they had done with their own hands. I was gone, but I can still see how it began. The letter that had once given them hope now weighed like a stone in their pockets. The chest was theirs in name only, locked by an impossible demand. And though they left that office angry, swearing at the unfairness of it all, inside their hearts there was something else, fear. Because they knew the truth, they had sold more than a ring. They had sold a fortune. At first, their search was frantic. They ran from one pawn shop to another, asking questions, begging for answers. They described the ring again and again, their voices tight with desperation. Most shopkeepers barely glanced up before shaking their heads. Some smirked knowingly. A few even laughed. A family heirloom? Sold for a few hundred? Lady, that's gone. Melted down, resold, long forgotten. Each rejection chipped away at Lily's pride. Every closed door was another reminder of the choice she had made. She carried the weight of her grandmother's words in her ears. You sold my heart for scraps. Weeks became months. Their hope dimmed, but their obsession grew. They haunted flea markets, haggled with antique dealers, and even placed ads in newspapers, pleading for anyone who might have seen a gold band with a unique shine. Mark scraped together money to hire a private investigator, a man who promised much and delivered nothing before vanishing with their last savings. The stress seeped into their marriage. Arguments erupted daily. "This is your fault," Mark shouted one night, his fists pounding the kitchen table. "You should have told me to leave it alone." "My fault," Lily cried, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "You were the one who took it. You didn't even ask. You just stole it from her drawer like a common thief." Their children, Rosie and Leo, watched from the corner, their innocence shrinking with every raised voice. The home that should have been filled with laughter turned into a battlefield. Meanwhile, far away, Bethany and David moved forward with their lives. Bethany settled into the Orchard Street house, filling it with warmth. She repainted the walls, planted flowers in the garden, and hosted neighbors for tea. She spoke to her friends about how grateful she was, not for the house itself, but for the reminder of her grandmother's trust. David used the inheritance not for extravagance, but to secure his future and donate generously to causes his grandmother had loved. He became known in his circle not as a man of wealth, but as a man of character. Both Bethany and David carried my memory with honor, not with bitterness. And all the while, Lily and Mark sank deeper into misery. By the 6th month, their savings were gone. They moved into a cramped apartment on the outskirts of town, the wallpaper peeling, the heat unreliable. The children grew quiet, sensing the despair in the air. Lily's once bright eyes grew hollow, dark circles forming beneath them. Mark grew sullen, drinking more, speaking less. When he did speak, it was often to lash out. Still, Lily kept searching. She wandered through dusty shops, her hands trembling as she sifted through trays of old rings, each time hoping, each time failing. The humiliation of telling their story to strangers became her daily burden. Some pitied her, some dismissed her, and some shook their heads knowingly, saying, "Lady, you're chasing smoke." The more hopeless the task became, the more determined she felt, though even she couldn't say why anymore. Was it really for the chest? For the fortune she now knew she had thrown away? Or was it something deeper, a desperate attempt to wash away the shame of what she had done? Mark didn't see it that way. To him, the search was punishment, a constant reminder of his failure. "It's gone, Lily," he would roar. It's gone, and she knew it. This was her way of laughing at us from the grave. But Lily couldn't stop. She couldn't let go. The thought of that chest, sitting silently in Mr. Davies's office, waiting for her, drove her into obsession. 9 months passed. Then 10. The desperation became frantic again. They traveled across state lines chasing rumors. A dealer in New Hampshire claimed he had bought a gold band from a pawn shop in Boston, but when they arrived, the description didn't match. A shopkeeper in Providence swore he had seen something similar, but by the time they got there, the ring had already been sold again. Each false lead drained them further, until their faces carried the weary look of people much older than their years. By the 11th month, their marriage was barely holding together. Their children were withdrawn, their home nearly bare. Lily had lost weight from stress, her hair dull, her spirit frayed. Mark spent more nights away, returning home late, his eyes clouded with drink. And yet, she pressed on. With the final weeks approaching, she searched harder, her footsteps dragging through snow and rain, her voice hoarse from asking the same hopeless question. "Have you seen this ring?" Every story like this carries a lesson that could change how you see family forever. If you don't subscribe, you risk missing the wisdom that could guide your children and grandchildren one day. And if you truly believe you don't need these lessons, go ahead and explain why in the comments. When the final week arrived, she knew the truth. The ring was gone. The year had been wasted. And yet, she could not stop herself from clinging to the faintest thread of hope. On the last day, she and Mark walked once more into Mr. Davies's office. The same chairs, the same table, the same heavy silence. Bethany and David were already there, sitting quietly, their presence alone enough to remind Lily of the choices she had made. Mr. Davies looked at her with calm eyes. "Lily, Mark, have you been able to locate the ring?" Lily's voice cracked as she whispered, "No. It's gone. We couldn't find it." Mark slammed his hands on the table, his voice bitter and raw. "This was all a game. She wanted us to suffer. She made us chase a ghost." Mr. Davies didn't flinch. He folded his hands and said softly, "Your grandmother wanted you to understand. I was gone, but in that moment, I know they felt me. Every wasted mile, every sleepless night, every cruel argument, it had all been my lesson. They had traded love for money, and in the end, they lost both. The chest still waited. But what they would find inside was not what they thought. The reckoning was about to begin. The year had ended. The deadline I set had finally arrived, and Lily walked into Mr. Davies's office carrying nothing but failure. She looked hollow, as though every ounce of hope had been drained from her. Mark trailed behind her, his face set in a mask of anger, though even he seemed weighed down by the futility of it all. Bethany and David were already seated, calm, collected, their presence like a silent reminder of the life Lily could have chosen if she had valued trust over greed. Mr. Davies rose to his feet and adjusted his papers. "Lily, Mark, have you been able to return the wedding ring?" Lily's lips trembled. "No," she whispered. "We searched everywhere. It's gone." Mark slammed his hands against the table. "This was never about a ring. This was about punishing us. You knew it was impossible." Mr. Davies did not raise his voice. He simply looked at them with steady eyes and said, "Your grandmother wanted you to learn." He walked to the corner of the office where the hope chest waited. Its carved wood was darkened with age, the lock gleaming faintly in the dim light. He bent down, pulled a silver key from his pocket, and turned it slowly. The lock clicked open, and the chest creaked as he lifted the lid. Empty. Mark let out a bitter laugh. "See? Nothing. Just like I said. A cruel trick." But Mr. Davies shook his head. He knelt down again, pressed a hidden latch, and revealed a small compartment at the very bottom. Inside was a folded letter. He lifted it carefully, holding it as though it weighed more than any fortune. This, he said, was written in Agnes's own hand. Lily reached forward with trembling fingers and took the letter. The paper was worn, the handwriting familiar. Her eyes scanned the words, and as she read, her face crumpled. My dearest Lily, if you are holding this letter, it means you have failed. It means you have spent a year chasing what you once discarded without care. You believed my ring was worth only a handful of bills. But it was never about the money. It was about love, about memory, about respect. You see, when I discovered the ring missing, I knew immediately what had happened. I knew you and Mark had taken it. And I also knew that the pawn shop would give you little for it, not nearly what it was truly worth. So I went there myself. I bought it back with my own savings, the money I had set aside for my burial. I could not bear the thought of my Michael's ring lying in a stranger's drawer, treated as nothing more than scrap. I placed it in a new compartment within this very chest, one that only I could open. From there, I took it to my grave. I was buried with it on my finger, where it will remain until the end of time. The hope chest was never meant to hold treasure. It was meant to hold a lesson. I wanted you to spend a year searching, desperate to find what you had thrown away, only to discover that it was never yours to reclaim. The punishment was not losing money. The punishment was wasting a year of your life chasing emptiness, all because of a choice you made in greed. I loved you, Lily, but you broke something that cannot be repaired. That emptiness you feel now is the same emptiness you left in me when you sold the one piece of my life that mattered most. Your chest is now empty, just as the trust between us is empty. And I pray you never forget this lesson. Grandmother. The letter slipped from Lily's hands and drifted to the floor. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, as though the air had been ripped from her lungs. Mark stood frozen, his jaw tight, fury radiating from him. But even his anger faltered in the face of the truth. They had not only lost a fortune, they had lost their dignity, their chance at redemption, and the respect of a woman who had once given them everything. Bethany sat quietly, tears running down her cheeks, not of guilt, but of sorrow for what her cousin had become. David lowered his head, his expression solemn, knowing that their grandmother's final act had been both justice and mercy. Lily stared at the chest, her hands trembling. The emptiness inside it mocked her, louder than any words could. She had wasted a year chasing a ghost, only to learn that the ring she sought was already buried forever, resting with the woman who had loved it most. That was my final act, my last gift, my last lesson. I had been betrayed, but I had not been silenced. Even from the grave, I made sure they understood the weight of their choices. Bethany and David left that office with their heads held high, carrying forward not only their inheritance but the responsibility of honoring my memory. Lily and Mark left with nothing but a chest of emptiness and the knowledge that they had brought it upon themselves. And I rested quietly, knowing justice had been done. When all was said and done, my story was no longer mine alone. It lived on in the choices of my grandchildren. Bethany and David carried it with quiet dignity, while Lily carried it like a weight she could never set down. Bethany moved into my old house on Orchard Street, filling it with the kind of warmth I had always hoped it would keep. She planted flowers in the yard, opened the curtains wide each morning, and invited neighbors in for tea. She kept my photograph on the mantel, and each evening she would light a candle beside it, whispering good night as though I were still sitting in my chair. She did not honor me with words alone, but with the way she lived, with kindness, steadiness, and gratitude. David, too, chose wisely. He used his inheritance not for extravagance, but for stability, generosity, and care. He gave to causes that mattered to me, ensuring that stray animals found shelter and that children without books had libraries to walk into. He carried on my values, showing that money in the right hands can build instead of destroy. But Lily was left with a chest that held nothing but emptiness, and a letter that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She had wasted a year chasing a ring she would never find, pouring her days into a task that had no end. And when the truth came, when she learned that I had already taken the ring back and carried it to my grave, her despair was complete. Mark raged, but even his fury could not mask the truth. They had betrayed trust, and in doing so, had betrayed themselves. The chest became a symbol of their loss. It sat in their apartment, silent and accusing, a reminder of the year they had squandered, the opportunities they had thrown away, and the trust they could never regain. Some wounds heal. This one did not. And that is the lesson I want you to hear, the one I hope echoes louder than the sorrow of my story. Trust, once broken, is not easily repaired. A ring can be replaced, but the love and respect it symbolized cannot. Money may ease hardship, but it cannot buy back dignity. I gave Lily and Mark everything I could, my home, my support, my care. They took even more, not out of necessity, but out of disregard. And so, I left them with nothing but the consequences of their own choices. Bethany and David, who had never asked for more than my love, carried my blessings forward. Lily, who thought she could take without cost, carried only regret. That is the way of life. So, to those listening now, especially the grandmothers, the women who have given and sacrificed and held families together with hands that never stop working, remember this: your love is priceless. Do not let anyone treat it as less. Stand firm in the knowledge of your worth. Do not be afraid to teach the lessons that others refuse to learn. Even in silence, even from the grave, your wisdom can shape the future. I am at peace knowing that my story did not end with theft, but with truth. That truth lives in Bethany's laughter as she tends her garden, in David's steady hands as he gives to others, and yes, even in Lily's tears as she faces the emptiness she created for herself. That is my legacy, not just the house, not just the money, not even the ring. The legacy is the lesson. Grannies who carry stories like this carry power. If you want to stand with a circle of women who learn from pain and grow stronger together, hit subscribe right now. And if you choose not to, at least leave a comment explaining why, because silence only teaches others to repeat the same mistakes. And so my tale ends here. But the wisdom it carries, that will live on, as long as there are ears willing to hear it and hearts willing to hold it.